Welcome to the Amazon QuickSight Learning Series. I hope your day is off to a great start and wanted to introduce you to today's topic, which is keep your data fresh with incremental spice refresh. My name is Jill Florent. I'm the head of customer success for Amazon QuickSight, and today's speaker is going to be Karthik Tharmarajan, Senior QuickSight Solutions Architect. Just to make sure you're in the right place, this session is going to dive deep into Spice Incremental Refresh and how it behaves and how you can optimize the configuration in order to take advantage of the nature of your data and needs of your business. Also, in regards to questions, one of the nice things about attending the session live is that we are going to try and answer as many of your questions as possible during the session today and shortly after. The place that we do that is in the QuickSight community, which you can get to either from directly within your account in the lower left corner or by going to community.amazonquicksite.com. You can take a picture of this QR code to be taken directly to it as well. It'd be a good idea to do that if you've not yet logged into the community. Once you're into the community, you'll see a Q&A section under categories, and essentially what you're going to be able to do is use the search bar at the top to see if your question might already have an answer to it. But if it does not, you can click on the link to create a question, and as I mentioned, our goal here today would be to have our subject matter experts during the session answering as many of your questions as possible. We would encourage you to use the tag hashtag QLS-spice. What that indicates to us is that you did attend today's session and this is on that particular topic. Anyone who uses that would then see not only their own question, but any other questions that come up, which might be a nice feature for you if you're trying to learn more about all the things that Spice can do for you. Finally, I did want to call out that the session today is being recorded, and we will post this by the end of the week to our QuickSight YouTube channel. This is a great place to bookmark as well, and it's accessible through the link that you see here on the screen. There's all kinds of short videos and longer workshops that you can access on the QuickSight YouTube channel.
Thanks, Jill. Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Karthik Tharmarajan, Senior QuickSight Solutions Architect. And today we will dive into what QuickSight Spice is and try to understand incremental refresh. So we'll start off by understanding or take a look into what QuickSight Spice is and the different modes of refresh. But the core of today's session is going to be around incremental refresh, and we will dive deeper into how Spice handles incremental refresh. So Amazon QuickSight, for folks who don't know, is a scalable business intelligence BI service built for the cloud, which allows insights to be shared with all users in the organization. Additionally, QuickSight offers Spice as an in-memory cloud-native data store that allows end users to interactively explore data. So when you import data into a data set, rather than using a direct SQL query, it becomes what we call a Spice data set. So what are the major advantages of using Spice, or why should we care to use Spice? So Spice provides consistently fast query performance. It automatically scales for high concurrency. Once you create a Spice dataset, it can be reused multiple times, which translates to saving time and cost, because you don't need to retrieve data from the data source, whether a database or a data warehouse, every time you change an analysis or update a visual. And when you remove the load off of your concurrent access or analytical complexity of the underlying data source, it becomes time and cost efficient. So now that we understand what Spice is, so how do we ensure the data in Spice is going to be latest, right? So there are two modes in which you can refresh Spice. The first one is full refresh, where you query data off of your backend data source or database, and you are going to fully replace what you previously had within Spice. So that is full refresh. On the other hand, incremental refresh, as the name suggests, allows us to load just the latest data that has changed. since from our last refresh, instead of refreshing the whole data set within Spice itself. So with incremental refresh, you can update Spice dataset in fraction of the time a full refresh would take, enabling access to most recent insights much sooner. You can schedule incremental refresh to run up to every 15 minutes on a data source based off of SQL, such as Amazon Redshift, Amazon Athena, PostgreSQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Snowflake, so on and so forth. All right, now that we spoke about full refresh and incremental refresh, let's jump into QuickSight console. I would like to show how to set up incremental refresh. And from there, we'll take a couple of use cases and understand how incremental refresh is handled within Spice. All right. So I have prepared a demo data set, which is powered off of Amazon Redshift. This is also the new look and feel that will be launched eventually, but you all are going to get a sneak peek of how the dataset screen might look like. So this button is going to be a little different from our traditional look and feel. Clicking on Add New Schedule will bring up a pop-up where you can actually select between full refresh and incremental refresh. This session, we are going to focus on incremental refresh. So I'm going to flip to incremental. And you can select the schedule for your incremental refresh. You can go up to 15 minutes if you like. But the important piece to understand as part of incremental refresh is the configuration itself. So we need an anchoring or a date column. So from this data set, we are going to use the order date as the anchoring column, and window size. So please do remember this attribute window size. That's going to be an important attribute to remember. And then the window size, either you go back in time, say 1 day, 1 hour, a week, so on and so forth. Once you have this configuration done and you have your schedule ready and you save this, your Spice is going to be refreshed based on the schedule and the window and the time frame that you defined. Well, I'm not going to save this, but let's take a couple of use cases and understand under the hood how incremental refresh is handled. I'm going to use an Excel file to demonstrate how internally incremental refresh is handled. We'll start off with the sample data set here, all the way to the top left. Let's imagine we just have 2 columns, just to keep this simple, the ID column and the created date. And as seen in the previous screen, we will be using created date as the anchoring column to initiate our incremental refresh. So let's start off by doing a full refresh. So I'm going to select all the rows from the source, and then let's have the log created here. Starting from row number 20, we are going to keep a log of our full and incremental refresh. So let's start off by creating a full refresh for 817, which essentially translates to selecting all of these rows and pushing it into Spice. So we are good so far, pretty straightforward to understand. However, at this point, as seen in the prior screen, we are going to turn on the incremental refresh. And once you turn on the incremental refresh, there were 2 important parameters. That was a look back window. In this example, let's assume we use a look back window of 1 day. And what internally that translates to is Spice is going to create a checkpoint based on the latest refresh runtime. Because we initiated the run at 8:17, the look back window is 1 day. The checkpoint is a basic day difference calculation, which is run date minus the look back window. So the checkpoint is going to be 8/16/2022. So once the checkpoint is computed internally, Spice is going to create 2 layers. So one is going to be the append segment, and the other one is the refresh segment. So for every subsequent incremental refresh, it's only the refresh segment within Spice that would be replaced, and records would flow into the append segment as we go along our incremental refresh schedule. So with that, let's try to visually represent that. So all data which is after 8:16 will be your refresh segment. And anything prior to that would be your append segment. Now, the following day when the incremental refresh kicks in, we are going to add a row in our source. Just to demonstrate this, let's keep a log of our incremental refresh. So for this data set, we are going to fire the initial query for the data set, which is select star from the table. However, the schedule is for an incremental refresh. So on top of the select star from table query, we are going to have a where clause for the incremental refresh, which essentially narrows down to the data set that we are looking for. A sample query would look like this, where we are selecting all the data. However, the filter is going to be on the created date greater than the checkpoint, which was computed when we initiated the schedule for incremental refresh. So in this example, we are only going to pick all the rows which came in after 8:16. So these two records, row ID 4 and 5. I'm just going to visually represent them. So once we identify these rows, we are simply going to replace the refresh segment with the newly identified rows. As soon as this is done, we are going to recompute our checkpoint. So after the initial incremental refresh, now the checkpoint is going to be based off of the latest run, which is 8:18 minus the look back window, which is 1 day in our example. So checkpoint is going to be 8:17 now. With the checkpoint computer, we are going to segregate or identify the refresh segment and append segment. So all records after 8:17 is going to be your refresh segment, and anything prior to that will roll into your append segment. Pretty straightforward to understand, and this would continue as we move along. Let's take one more example to understand how it would work for the subsequent incremental refresh. We'll add another row. Data came in for 8:19, so we're going to log the incremental refresh for 8:19. The same process again, select star from table. However, this time the where clause condition is going to be look for all records where the created date is greater than 8:17. So it's going to be record number 5 and 6. Copy them over and then replace that with the refresh segment. Again, the same process, recompute your checkpoint. So this is going to be 8:18. And then identify a new refresh segment, which is all records which came in after 18th. And anything prior to that will roll into your append segment. So at a high level, this is how your basic incremental refresh is handled within QuickSight. Now let's try to understand this when we also have a create or an updated date timestamp in your data set. And if we leverage the last update timestamp for incremental refresh, how things might look. Let's go into scenario 2. Similar setup. We'll start off with the incremental refresh, but please keep in mind this time around we are going to anchor everything based off of our last update timestamp. So let's log our initial run for the full refresh, basically selecting everything from source, pushing it back into your Spice data set. Now we are going to compute the checkpoint because we have a subsequent incremental refresh. So the latest runtime is 8:17 and we go 1 day back in time. So it's going to be 8:16. The checkpoint computed, we are now able to identify a refresh segment and append segment. So everything after 8:16 is going to be your refresh segment, and anything prior to that will be our append segment. Now, for the following day, let's say we have few inserts. We start off our first initial incremental refresh. The same drill again, select star from table, but for incremental refresh, this time we are going to look for all records where the last updated time is greater than the checkpoint, so which is essentially row number 4 and 5. Copy them over and replace that with the refresh segment. At this point, we are going to compute the checkpoint again. So latest run date is 8/18. Look back window is 1 day, so the checkpoint is going to be 8/17. And all records which came in after 8/17 will be our refresh segment. Anything prior to that will be append segment. Now for the next incremental refresh, let's try to have an insert and also an update and see how things work now. So let's say we have one record just inserted, and then let's say record number 5 got updated. Now let's log the next incremental refresh for 8/19. Select start from table, apply the where clause, give me all records where last updated timestamp is greater than 8/17. So essentially it is going to bring in these two rows because they were updated on 19th. Select them and replace that with your refresh segment. Recompute your checkpoint and identify your refresh segment. So anything that came after 8/18 is going to be a refresh segment, which is essentially these two rows. Let's do one more run, but this time we are going to go beyond the look back window and see what happens. We're going to add another row for the next run. We have an insert. And let's say the record on the 17th got updated as well. Let's log this run for 8/20. The same process, select start from table, but look for all records where the last update timestamp is greater than 8/18. So it's gonna look for these records here. And replace the selected records in the refresh segment. Recompute your checkpoint. And then identify your refresh segment. So all records which came in after the 19th is going to be your refresh segment. These two records will be part of our append segment. But now, if you closely observe, we see two records for ID number 4. The reason we see two records is because we had one record in the append segment, which would be untouched as part of our incremental refresh. However, because there was an update in the source system, we identified that as part of our incremental refresh and brought that over. But the way Spice handles incremental refresh is based off of your look back window where we segregate the refresh segment. And this update happened beyond the look back window of 1 day, right? So we went back in time, a record which came in on 17th, which was beyond the 1 day look back window. When that gets updated, there is a possibility that you might end up having the same record twice within Spice. So when you run into these kind of scenarios, one thing to keep in mind is you'll have to assess your source system, understand the business flow, and based on your transactions that happen on your front-end system, you should be able to optimize the look back window. So let's say in this example, if you had the look back window as 2 days as opposed to 1 day, you wouldn't run into this issue of seeing record ID 4 showing up twice in Spice, right? You could also do a 3-day look back window, so on and so forth. It all boils down to how your source system is getting updated, or rather how frequently your source system is getting updated. And based off of that, you are able to come up with an optimized look back window. So that is one way to handle this. So let's try to trace our steps back and see if we do a 2-day look back window, how this scenario would work. So I'm just going to change the run for 20th. Let's start off with the run for 20th again. And this time, the checkpoint is going to be 2 days back in time. So for 19th, it would be 17. So we need to take these rows off temporarily. We'll repopulate them again. So anything that came after 817, so for 818, we should have a record. So this one. So basically anything that came after, so maybe we'll have to trace our step back to 818. Let's do that again. I'm going to undo this real quick just to showcase how the 2-day window is going to work. All right, so let's 18 minutes good. Let's start off with the record for 818. So on 818, we select all the rows. So when it was 17, the checkpoint should have been 815, 2022. So this basically should have been your refresh segment. So now when we run a refresh on 18th, let's say we also had an update which happened on the 16th, which is 2 days back. So all records which came in after 15th is identified for refresh. So these 3 rows are selected. And it's going to refresh or replace the data in your refresh segment. And now you can see that even though the record from 2 days old came in, we didn't introduce the duplicate for row number 3, right? Because we were able to have that as part of our refresh segment. And that way we could slide that window over and not have a duplicate record created. So this is one way how you can handle your look back window efficiently. And if you are not in a position where you are able to understand how your source system is getting updated, there are ways you can handle this from QuickSight UI itself. Let's go and take a look at that option. I have a mockup data where I've introduced duplicates. Let's walk through that example. So the top left, you can see it's pretty similar to the scenario that we had. So we have a couple of records for record ID 4, which got introduced based off of our look back window being just 1 day. And now when you do a sales by ID, you would see that this data is duplicated. And for record ID 4, the sales is $1,000 instead of $500. Now, if we go ahead and create a calculation in your analysis to always pick the max date, no matter what, so you'd always come back with just 1 record. That way, you are going to suppress these duplications that happen, and your end users or people accessing your dashboard don't get inflated numbers. So I'll quickly show you the calculation that I have created for picking the latest date. It's going to be a simple if-else clause using max over function. I'm just comparing that with the latest update date. If the max date is equal to that row's date, then it is true, else false, right? So you can see it is true in all the cases except for this record highlighted in red, where the last updated date is 17, but the max happens to be 19. So we were able to isolate that. And in the next report here on the right, I have applied that filter, and now the report just comes back with the appropriate numbers. So this is how you would essentially handle this from front end. But what is more efficient to do is having a mix of both full refresh and incremental refresh. So if you're planning to have incremental refresh, always ensure you sneak in a full refresh. Depending on what your business needs are, it could be over the weekends, it could be middle of the week, depending on the volume of data that you're dealing with. Considering all of those aspects, say every 3 days, in this example, if you have a full refresh, you wouldn't run into the risk of introducing duplicates. If at all, you are anchoring based off of last update date. In scenario 1, when we tested this out based off of create date, which is just pure inserts, you'd never run into this issue. However, based on last update date, you would run into 2 scenarios, just pure inserts and also updates. But how back in time is your transaction system able to go and update a record? That's what defines your look back window. It could be 1 day, 1 week, 30 days, a month, a year, so on and so forth. But as a best practice, we recommend having a full refresh done more often, so that way you don't run into introducing these duplicates to your end users. And in the interim time, when you are not able to do a full refresh, you could have some calculations created on your dashboards, which will effectively filter out those duplicate records and not inflate numbers or sales numbers in this example. With that, I hope you all got a good understanding of how incremental refresh works within Spice. And I'm going to switch it over to the presentation mode. And I would like to thank everybody for taking time to join us on the session to understand how Spice and incremental refresh works. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful that you joined us for the session today and would love to ask for your feedback. If you'd like to click the link that you see here or to find out more events like this one that can contribute to your learning about QuickSight, just go to the community and the events page. Thank you so much for joining us.